Hey there, goblins. Welcome to Goblin Salvage Rights. My name's Robert.
I'm Erik.
And today, we're going to build some dangerous hazards.
Nothing exciting here, just life and death.
Life and death and you. And maybe some ghosts.
Are you stealthy enough?
Are you witty enough?
Do you have the skills?
I don't think you do.
I'm not sure we care because there's always another character to burn after this.
Always another character.
Always be TPKing.
Always be TPKing. Absolutely. So yeah, this episode is about building hazards.
Hazardous hazards and the people who hazard them.
Yeah, a whopping 3 pages in the GM core. I'm excited to make this another 2-hour podcast.
Aren't they all? I mean, if we're going to do 2 hours on something, killing your friends for fun and profit sounds like a good way to go.
Absolutely. I'm actually really excited about this topic simply because I think hazards are undervalued in a lot of ways. And I think by the end of this episode, not only will you be able to make a hazard, but I think you'll want to use them more often as set pieces and world building.
Yeah. God, I want to say so much right now, but yes to everything you just said.
Well, first, we got to thankies our patrons. Hey, patrons. I know you're watching.
You're still out there.
Thank you. We appreciate you. And if you, Goblin, think you might want to join the tribe on Patreon, get into the secret Discord, well, what I recommend, go check out our 2024 to-do list. We have all of 2024 planned for our Patreon. You can see what we're going to be publishing every month. There's a link in the doobly-doo, so doobly get down there and check it out. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, it's basically a bunch of awesome third-party stuff, secret access to our Discord, secret spots at our Discord, whole 9 yards.
It's like all the answers in the back of the math book.
Pretty
much there for you.
Direct access into our veins. You pay $5 a month.
That's gross.
To shit on us on Discord every month.
I mean, that right there should be worth the price of admission.
Yeah. I charge people for admission. So yeah. But seriously though, about that Discord, we have almost 70 goblins.
70 goblins. We're almost at triple digits.
In our Discord right now. It's starting to get a little unmanageable. Honestly, I'm beginning to be like, whenever I at someone, it's the warning pops up and they're like, are you sure you want to do this?
Right.
You're about to yell at 70 people. Give 70 people notifications. And I'm like, abso-fucking-lutely.
Right. If
they need to see this picture of my cat that I just posted. I promise I don't actually post pictures of my cats and at everyone. But if you want to see more pictures of the kitties, let me know in the comments.
Each one has their own OnlyFans page.
Absolutely. Only kittens. So yeah, check out the Discord. It's fucking rad. If you make a hazard after this video, we would love to hear about it in the comments or in the Discord, especially in the Discord, but also in the comments. Please leave a comment on this video. I love the engagement on YouTube. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing I like about the Discord and stuff like this, how to build a hazard, how to build an item, how to build a monster, is it's kind of like very much, bring it and share with the class so we can all kind of like learn together. Because if there's stuff that we're just missing here, we're not going to find out until other people join the conversation and say, hey, have you thought about this or consider these or those? Yeah, and
Erik posts like a daily or weekly, it feels like it's almost daily now, like a prompt where you're just like, hey, there's a cool idea for a character I had. Can someone flesh this out more? Like, make a character out of it.
Kind of mad libs for character building.
Yeah, and it's basically filling up an NPC repository like that. I mean, I think you've already done like 10 or 11 of them.
Oh, we've got at least a dozen now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even like at least 2 of them have been collabs with people.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like half a dozen goblins jump on and start filling in the blanks, and then I'll scoop up the ones I like and put them where they go. And somebody else will say, hey, I've got a picture here. Why don't you all do that? And then I get to jump in and start helping to fill in the blanks. And it's a good time, and it's a good way to get like a group, not group think, that's the wrong word. like a shared rogues gallery that we all contribute to.
Yeah.
And we can use in all of our games.
I love
regardless.
that. I love that shared rogues gallery of NPCs. Totally.
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about? What we played first before we jump into the topic?
Yeah, sure. My Edgewatch game, not a lot happened there. Just a giant, massive boss fight that destroyed part of the structure, caused it to collapse inward, and a giant Cthulhuoid creature started stomping all over everybody. I think he covered 9 squares.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bloody room in the bottom of a bloody dungeon.
I got to cast a spell I talked about on a previous episode, which was Rust Cloud.
Yeah.
And it absolutely shredded the lungs of some of the bad guys. It was amazing. I popped it, ran out of the cloud. There's like 3 of them. I think 2 of them rolled one of them rolled a failure. One of them rolled a critical failure. And I think one of them was like unaffected. So 2 of them practically just dropped immediately. Yeah. And the third one was left choking. Later on, one of the NPCs like fucking attacked him in the cloud and then he like choked to death. It was peak wizard. It
was fun and cinematic, and it took over 3 sessions to do, I think.
Yeah.
For this part of the dungeon anyway. It's a big old dungeon crawl. It took like 5 or 6
and
actual
we're still on the
do.
second half of the boss fight.
This coming up should be the this is it. This is like the boss fight in quotes. But the thing I wanted to point out, and I talked about this in a previous video, how I led up to this moment, was how to take like a party of 4 or 5 and then isolate them in different parts of the dungeon and continue to throw mathed encounters at them in ways that feel like they're grossly unfair. But there is a math. I just hit it and I didn't tell anybody what it was. And they all like did actions and, did things and chipped away at hit points. But it was almost like a giant experience pool of hit points that everybody was individually chopping away in. I'll talk more about that when we're done with this week's session.
And you have it a little more codified.
Yeah. But I wanted to isolate you guys and make you guys feel like not only were you out of your league, but this is it. This is how we go down. We all got pulled apart. We can't see anything. Everybody else can see in this shadowy thing. Anyhow, it was a giant clusterfuck of a combat that you guys came out on top, right? Literally, this colossal creature takes up 9 squares and is dead. So for part 2 of the boss fight, the entire room's difficult terrain because we're fighting on top of the corpse of the thing we just killed. So metal.
Right.
And then the actual serial killer boss comes up with her crew. And this is where the personal combat comes in as opposed to the impersonal combat.
And I already popped a phantasmal killer on her.
We did
the wombo combo and it still didn't really pull off.
That was unfortunate, but it was a big moment for you.
Yeah, it was still pretty cool. I still got some pretty decent damage in though. That was pretty cool. And then we played.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Then we played Kingmaker.
Which was probably. I really try not to say things like this because I'll just say it again next week and it'll still be true. I think it's the best thing I've ever seen you run.
Really?
Yeah, like sitting at that table, it didn't go the way I expected it to.
Same.
At all, even a little bit.
Never does.
But you rolled with it so incredibly well that by the time I caught up with it, I realized, wait, this couldn't have happened any differently than it did. And like at the end of any good novel, you're like, 1, I didn't see it coming.
Right.
2, of course it ended this way. It couldn't have ended any other way. So it was a series of neat surprises from my side of the GM screen.
I did a little trick I learned by actually talking with some of my patrons. Like I was just vibing in the Discord chat.
You bastards were sneaky over there. I heard stories about this afterwards.
Yeah, so I was just hanging out in the chat and I think like Oak and a couple other people were vibing and just like voice chat with me. And I was talking about all these zany NPCs that I've kind of just like pulled out of my butt because you guys always talk your way through everything.
Yeah.
So I have to come up with the NPCs randomly. And I'm like,
not sorry.
I want to stick to Kingmaker, but I don't want to give up on these NPCs.
Right.
So I think someone in the chat was like, or maybe we all came together and we're like, well, why don't you just like replace NPCs that are in the book? And the player companion, there's this great player GM companion book for Kingmaker, where it's basically like all the stuff from the Kingmaker game that was uniquely created by the video game designers. They put in a book so you could reintroduce it into Kingmaker later.
Cool.
And what I had the epiphany was like, okay, we've got this kobold who's like this hero among men. The players literally called the hero. They literally called the kobold the hero of the story, and they're just like the supporting cast, which I thought was really funny, and everyone loved this character. So instead of doing something silly with them and getting rid of them, I just replaced them with Tuk Tuk or Tartuk, which is like one of these this like goblin, this crazy Lamashtu worshiping goblin that is supposed to be in and out of your story and eventually like a friend of the party. Okay. So I just basically swapped them and rolled with it.
Yep.
And apparently it worked.
It totally
everyone
worked,
was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and none of us had that book to read through, so we don't know what you're doing over there.
Exactly.
It's a cool extra tool to have in your back pocket.
Yeah. It made me feel like it was like one of the first proud GM moments I had.
I'm happy to hear that.
GM got him kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you definitely had us.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's jump into the topic for today.
All right.
What are hazards, Eric? And why do we want to have more hazards in our games?
Hazards are a type of encounter that create a threat that the PCs need to interact with and circumvent. They can either solve it or bypass it, but essentially it's a set of criteria that once the criteria are met, bad things happen to your player characters. Mm-hmm. You can think of it like a guillotine coming down out of the ceiling where there was no guillotine before. Yeah. You step on a flagstone and then boom, blade comes down and, cut your nuts off, whatever. It could be something like, I don't know, a pool of water that you have to walk along a ledge and pass that water. Mm-hmm. And then it just so happens there's a jumping stingray riding a jellyfish. And they pop out at a certain point when you reach a certain a step.
Right.
Or you meet some other criteria. So you meet criteria, the hazard triggers, whatever that trigger is. You typically have something like a saving throw you can do or some way to avoid it. Or it makes an
attack against you.
Or it makes an attack against you.
Right.
If you're trained enough, like expert or higher, you can actually see these hazards before they pop sometimes and then disable them before they trigger. But if they are triggered and you're in the middle of them, say you sit down to a dining room table in a haunted house, and because you're sitting down at that table, because, what PCs can resist that goofy little scenario.
Absolutely.
That's when the spirits pop up in each of the other chairs and you've triggered the hazard.
Right.
So whatever that criteria is, you trigger it and then things happen, typically bad. I've never seen a positive hazard out there. I'm sure there's
That's some design space that we should probably cook up then. That's actually a really cool idea.
Yeah.
So hazards are broken up in the book in 3 major categories. Mm-hmm. There are traps, which are kind of a misnomer. They're traps and devices and things that happen. They're things that happen, basically. A good example of a non-trap is just a random portal to another dimension opening up.
Yeah.
Another category.
They're constructs.
Constructs, yeah. Another category is environmental hazards. So like an avalanche or an earthquake.
Yeah, magma flow,
something like that. And then a meteor just like randomly landing on the players. Who knows?
What's that trigger?
And
you drank all my beers.
Meteor. Exactly. You didn't bring the DM enough snacks. You get a meteor.
Rookie move.
Rookie mistake. And then the last one is haunts. Yeah. Haunts are spiritual in nature. They're cosmic, often occult, but not always. They don't necessarily have to be.
Sure.
They're kind of like the other when you can't fit a hazard into an environmental or like a construct of some sort. They're a haunt, something spiritual. And this is kind of, in my mind, the new piece of kit that Paizo 2nd edition has added to the hazard space that wasn't codified in previous editions.
Yeah, and they from what I've typically seen. And I can't think of an exception to this. They happen during encounter mode, pretty much. I mean, you can wander across one in exploration mode, sure, I guess, but every piece of published material I've seen with hazards in it, it's encounter mode.
Yeah.
You're going through a dungeon, you're moving through a copse of trees, you're I don't know, crawling through a crawl space in a cave or something like that.
Are you saying all hazards are in encounter mode or just the haunts? Because
I've yet to see a hazard that is not triggered while in encounter mode. If they exist, I just haven't seen them with my own eyes. And we're about to look at a bunch of examples of them, so they may pop up.
In my mind, almost all hazards are triggered during exploration mode.
Oh, okay.
Where you're exploring the dungeon, like,
because you're out of initiative.
Right.
Okay.
So like a pit trap would be exploration mode.
Yeah. And it triggers an encounter mode.
And then you enter encounter. Yeah, it's almost like hazard.
I said that completely wrong. You're totally right on that.
Yeah. So a trap, a hazard often brings you into forcefully exploration mode into an encounter
Yeah,
mode.
I think the reason I had that knee jerk is because I try to be fair with hazards, and I almost treat it like it's an encounter. Like I'll speak to you, and then you, and then you, and there will be an order of operations, a turn order, if you will.
And I think that feels very fair, especially because of the brutality of hazards and the math around them.
Yeah, hazards are no joke. They're just like they're another type of encounter.
Yeah.
If you run into a couple of hill giants, playing slinkies up and down the giant staircase, and you just happen to trip into them, that's a monster encounter.
Yeah.
And it has a 2 hill giants playing jacks on the stairs, 5 level 5 characters, 4 of them. We understand that. Yeah. Well, you have the same thing for hazards. Yeah. You have hazards that have level 5 hazards, and they have all the text and the crunch that go with them, and they're just as threatening as a level 5 pack of doofy hill giants playing jacks.
So we got traps, aka constructs. We've got environmental hazards, and then we've got haunts.
Yeah,
so those are the 3 major categories.
Into 2 categories a piece at that point. You have simple hazards and you have complex hazards.
Yeah.
So everything you just named can be done as a simple hazard or as a complex hazard. And we'll talk more about that.
They have different math, basically.
Yeah. And they're significantly more complicated.
Yeah. So why then would you want to use hazards in your game? Like, what's the appeal of hazards?
For me, and this is just my own taste here, there are problems that you throw at your players for them to solve. One of them is, how do I get through this monstrous encounter? A couple of hill giants. I hack my way through them. I diplomance them. I offer up, this PC's firstborn child, negotiate, whatever. How do I solve that story problem?
Right.
So monster encounters we're all familiar with. That tends to be like at least 75% of the challenges in any TTRPG anywhere. At least in the old days. I'm sure new indie games are going different ways with that. But we hunt monsters. That's what we do, at least in the D20 systems. That's the main focus. But there's also riddles and traps. We've had traps forever. We just didn't classify them as hazards. So they were just sort of like almost intended to deprive you of resources, but not in the same way that a monster would as you're going through AD&D 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th edition. So having hazards be its own separate category means that I can have an entire scene built around a monster. I can have it built around a riddle. I can have it built around this new thing called hazards.
Right.
And the hazards aren't just like, it's a pit trap with spikes at the bottom, like in the old days. It can be microclimates can be a hazard, things that happen in the natural world that aren't constructs, aren't traps the way we understand them in an Indiana Jones context.
Yeah, what I like about hazards in this new context is it allows you to do world building, which is, I know, something I harp on all the time, but it's the most important and interesting part of like these kinds of things to me is telling a story about the world that the characters are living in. And I think by doing that, they feel like they're living in the moment.
For sure.
Verisimilitude is cranked up when you have these moments. So like, why is this trap here?
Yeah.
Why is this haunt here? What can I teach the players about the place they're in?
Right.
By utilizing the haunt itself, by utilizing the environment itself. So
like the game we were just talking about, Edgewatch, a couple weeks ago, whenever it is we did it, there is a monster called Tiro Chase. He's ridiculously just bad mathed. And it was you can look it up on the internet. It's a second book of the Edgewatch series. Anyhow, it's bad just by the stat block. And it's also, and I'm saying bad with air quotes around it. This is me having a value judgment. This creature had nothing to do with the plot. It was just kind of dropped in. It was like, where can I put Godzilla in this adventure? This thing that doesn't belong, and you just can't write anything around it. It's just kind of there. It's like they needed to fill the space. I've seen hazards like that too. What is this shiny piece of Victoriana steampunk machinery doing in my caveman game? Why is this hazard on this page? I don't understand.
Yeah.
My verisimilitude is busted at this point. It's your comment on world building that kind of sent me down this direction. Monsters need to be relevant to the story. Hazards need to be relevant to the story. Like every detail, every actionable detail, every detail that interacts with your character sheet, it needs to make sense with everything else that's interacting with your character sheet in that story.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think hazards have kind of been elevated in my consciousness as a GM as I create these things in ways they just weren't in previous editions of the game.
I'm definitely going to try my best to start using hazards, environmental hazards, in my Kingmaker game while y'all are traveling the plains.
Yeah.
Because, a hazard, if you just encounter a hazard, let's say a tornado.
Yeah. Or a water geyser or something.
Rips the party apart. You know what I mean? You guys are traveling on a plane. You've already cleared the hex. There's no danger, but then a storm rolls in. There's a tornado that hits. It throws you guys around. You guys get hurt from that.
Sure.
Right? But because of the way that the game is played, half an hour later, you're all back up to full hit points probably.
Right.
But what did I just tell you about the world?
Right. You informed our understanding of the world.
Like, oh, fuck.
And now we can make decisions going forward based on that information.
Exactly. When we build a kingdom here, we're going to have to worry about tornadoes.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is GSR needs to publish a hazards for hex crawls product.
Ooh, baby. That sounds fucking awesome. But yeah, I have so many. Oh man, that got my juices flowing immediately. Absolutely. That would be so cool.
I live to get people's juices flowing.
Exactly. But yeah, no. So for me, these hazards are story building pieces.
Yeah.
You should try to include as many as you can. And I will say another really great benefit of hazards that I think are big selling ticket is time. Hazards can be quick.
They can be, yes.
And
simple hazards are ridiculously fast to do.
And you can hand out experience points for them.
Yes.
So one of the issues I'm running into is in 2024, one of my goals for my hobby is to bring my Kingmaker game up to level 10. Right. We play every other week, twice a month. And that means I have to basically dole out 250 experience points every single time we get together on average in order to get you from levels, 3 or 4 to level 10 by the end of the year.
Right.
That means I need to find quick and efficient ways to create stories and hand you points that are a part of this game. Now, if I wasn't running it so close to the book, what I'd probably start doing immediately is injecting hazards into my game on a regular basis to build up an experience points pool that's easy to flow the players through. That's quick to flow the players through, but also adds to the environment and the setting and the verisimilitude of the experience.
Sure. Yeah. Another thing I just thought of just now is the value of hazards is if you happen to have a group of people that won't stop talking to the monsters.
Oh my God. Yes.
You can't really talk to the hazards.
Talk your way out of a fucking pit trap.
So if you kind of want to get your players through experiences without getting bogged down in things like excessive combat with, initiative that goes on for 4 hours a session or, the same thing, NPC interactions that go on for far too long. If you have me at your table, then hazards might be a good way to just one and done, push them through. Here's the information you need to learn as a result of having, encountered, survived, and completed this hazard. Right. So, if your players just talk too much, then, you might need more hazards.
Or maybe you throw a haunt at them. They try to talk their way through the haunt.
Sure.
And the haunt goes on repeat.
Yeah. There's like a ticking time bomb of initiative coming up.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, we can't linger.
Exactly.
Stop lingering, Eric.
And if you
Why are you still talking to that skeleton, Eric?
If you communicate that really well to your players, that if you use like a time clock system from the Dagger Dark system.
Oh, a clock? Yeah. The Blades in the Dark.
Blades in the Dark, Dagger Dark system.
Forged in the dark.
If you use like a clock system like that and slap it on a haunt, all of a sudden you've got a ticking time bomb where basically the players only have
that's not a terrible idea at all.
Questions basically worth of information before it pops on them. So
that's juicy. Yeah.
These are all really good reasons why you would want to build a hazard. Again, one of the easiest things you can do with any hazard, and it's something I did with the hazard I created, strip hazards for parts.
Yes. Like monsters, just like NPCs.
Exactly. The hazard section in the GM core is chock full of 3 or 4 examples of every type of hazard you can think of at a myriad of different levels.
Yep.
I used it to literally inspire and then rip off my hazard that I created for today's podcast. Me and my partner, Amy, were sitting at the dinner table. I was like, look, I got to make a hazard for this.
Help me, Amy.
Yeah, we were
do my homework for me, Amy.
We started ideating just over dinner and stuff like that. And I started reading the chapter to her. And she's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if X did Y? And I'm like, yes.
As a matter of fact, it would.
That would be very cool. Yes, I'm going to write this down. Yes. Please, go on.
Put your initials at the bottom.
And because we because we started with a hazard,
Mm-hmm.
she literally wrote an adventure unknowingly
Mm-hmm.
around a hazard. She's like, oh, what if it did this and this? I'm like, yeah, why were they doing that? And I'm like, oh, well, they're doing it because of this and so on and so forth. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay, I literally just have an intro adventure for a level 1 party, literally written over the course of dinner.
I love it when people look at me and they say, yeah, I can't write. I don't know how to do stories. And then you trick them into doing it. And they deliver.
Yeah, but why? You just have to go like full.
Well, it's subconscious at this point. We've watched so many movies and read so many books and comics and whatever. We know the shit. We just don't understand that. We have the language for it.
Absolutely. So why should you build your own hazard? Well, it could inspire an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It could add to the verisimilitude of the adventure you have. It could speed up the amount of experience you can inject into your players.
It can contain details specific to players at the table, to characters at the table.
Yes.
So like having, PC number 3 have a personal connection to a hazard. That's something new.
Their dead grandmother come back as a ghost and
during
reach
a
out
haunt
to them.
hazard. Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Or like if one of your characters happens to have built up a massive resistance to flame, and one of the hazards contains a flame component, and part of the hazard is in order to deactivate it, you got to get in there.
Got to stick your hand in the fire in order to turn
something
it off.
like that. Yeah. So like hazards don't exist in a vacuum anymore.
I mean, like what kind of person, and this is perfect because it's like, it's moment building for a specific player at the table. You're a fire resistant person. And then you also have world building. It's like, what kind of person built this trap where you have to stick your hand in fire to turn it off?
Right.
Obviously someone who's also immune or resistant to this amount of fire.
Right.
Who
or
would
a Bene
that be?
Gesserit.
Yeah,
They do that shit all the time.
Exactly. Man, I can't wait for the second movie to come out.
I know.
Oh, dude. Denis Villeneuve is easily one of my favorite directors, like of all time.
Yeah.
So let's get into the brass tacks. Luckily, we're half an hour to the podcast.
Brassy
and
taxis.
We haven't started.
So basically, we're right on schedule.
To be fair, it's 3 pages long. It is 3 pages long. It is the simplest how to make a thing in the entire book.
Mm-hmm.
So first, you got to start with a concept.
Yep.
I always come back to this. You got to start a concept. What's the point of this thing? Is your goal to like teach the players about something? Is your goal to just inject some quick XP into the system? Like
just get a palate cleanser because you're tired of doing the same thing over and over with monsters?
Exactly. Maybe you have that player who wants to talk their way through everything and you want to get them to not have to talk or see what happens when they don't, that kind of thing.
Right.
What's your goal? Let's build around your goal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, now that we have our goal, we might have an idea of what we want to do. Maybe that goal inspired us into something. Do we have a picture?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have some sort of image in our mind or on the internet that we can reference on a regular basis to give us an idea of what we're working with?
Yeah, but please be careful if you're going to just Google search random traps to kill people with.
Yeah. Sometimes I
Please.
Google things that are ridiculous, and for whatever reason, my brain just expects Google to know that I want to search like archives of Nethy. Like today, I Googled grab. I just Googled the word grab, hoping that just subconsciously thinking, oh, Google knows. I mean,
right.
Grab in archives of Nethy. Exactly, and it brought me a couple like weird responses, but like the fourth thing down was like grab archives of Nethies.
Ah, that's awesome.
And I'm like, it's learning. It's learning.
I've never taken such pleasure in being spied on.
Yeah, well, Big Brother comes with its benefits, I guess. So first, you got to have your concept in mind.
Mm-hmm.
What is this freaking trappy trap supposed to do? What are we working on here?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Once you know what it is, it's going to fall into 1 to 3 categories more than likely.
Yep.
It's going to be a construct, like a trappy trap, like a spike trap, like a bear trap. It's going to be an environmental hazard of some sort, snowfall, maybe a rift in time. Something originally I wanted to play around with like a rift in time, like put the time tag on mine.
Sure.
But after having dinner, it was hard to go. It was hard to figure. So
yeah, no, that's a good idea. And again, tags. I'm always harping on tags.
Exactly.
That might be a cool way to like craft a hazard. Just like grab all the tags and pull 3 of them out of a hat.
Randomly
and
select
then create
some tags.
a hazard built around those tags.
Yes.
Especially with the Rage of Elements book having come out.
Oh my God. Tag a goblin, a goblin trap of some sort, goblin hazard, and then it's environmental. What does a environmental goblin hazard look like? You know what I mean? Yeah. So then the third and final category would be a haunt.
Yes.
Spiritual in nature. If it's not a lava flow or an earthquake, it's fucking spirits. It's something mystical, something occult, something otherworldly.
And for all of my Ravenloft peeps out there who like the gothic shit the way I do, there's not a ton of interesting traps in gothic, high fantasy, TTRPG materials that I've ever read. Again, if it exists, that's fine. I just haven't seen it. But I'm really curious to see like this whole, it's not a zeitgeist. There's this moment in Pathfinder 2nd edition that's kind of here right now. And I don't hear a ton of people talking about it where like hazards are a thing. We all know it because we've been reading the books for 3, 4, 5 years at this point. But how much of a thing can it be? Like a hazard, an entire house can be a hazard. The movie Saw, it can be a bunch of discrete hazards, or it can be a single hazard that's a complex hazard.
Saw is just a series
with
of hazards.
many triggers.
Yeah.
Or it's a single hazard with many components and parts to it that just happens to be all the experience points.
Right, of the entire game. Yeah.
You know, it's a sum total game. You win or you're dead. So the idea of hazards taking a more elevated role, taking up more of the space, in the idea of what does it mean to interact with an adventure. It's a different place for me personally. And with gothic horror, what do those traps look like? I mean, like, sure, there's a sarcophagus that spits out a zombie, or an Iron Maiden that opens, closes on you, pulls you in, and stabs you to death. But there's a million more out there, and I feel more empowered to do stuff, traps by genre, by looking at this chapter here.
Absolutely.
And the tags, I think, is what's going to kick it to another level.
Absolutely. So once you have your concept, then you got to determine the statistics of your trap, because traps and hazards are so simple that you kind of know what they're going to be doing. Like the concept is the whole ideation, basically. So then you just need to apply pen to paper.
Sure.
One of this is pretty common in all of the creation systems here in Pathfinder 2nd edition. You've got this extreme high, medium, and low kind of range.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, it's a balance. So if you have extreme on one end, you want to have like low on the other end to balance these things out, right?
Sure.
Or
we're on page 109, by the way, if you have your book in front of you.
Yeah, 109 and 110 of the GM core. So the game basically bifurcates this into two major parts. It basically says if you have a trap or thing that's hard to detect, intentionally hard to detect, it should be fairly easy to disable and circumnavigate. The opposite is true. If it's easy to detect, it should be pretty difficult to disassemble or get through on its own. That's the major balance. And frankly, this is probably the most simple balance we've ever seen in the game.
Yeah, because if you mess it up, it's easy to go back and recalibrate it because you only have so many options.
Exactly. There's like 3 or 4 levels to pull. There are levers to pull. There's how hard is it to detect it? There's how hard is it to disable it? And then there's how much damage and what's the DC to save from it? And then finally, if it's a thing you can just destroy, how hard is it to destroy it? And
like a shield or a wall or something similar.
Especially like a classic trap.
Yeah, and all of this we're going to go into more detail on when we do our short video on how to construct a hazard. Right now, this is sort of just us talking about this new thing. We're kind of picking apart, learning how it works. And then just trying to come up with examples of our own that are interesting. So if you want the nitty gritty stuff, then stay tuned. We got a short vid coming up.
Absolutely. So next up, once you basically choose whether or not you want you want it to be hard to find or hard to disable, you basically choose one of those things to be the extreme, like the hard thing to do. You give that its extreme number for its level. You got to determine what level you want this to be for your players, obviously. That comes first. First determine the level.
That's what I started with.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that.
First determine the level, and then everything flows from there. They've got these beautiful charts
where it says this video over now?
Level on the left-hand side, and then it just has the statistics going across of it.
Charts for days, you guys.
Charts for days.
Can't get lost.
Love me some spreadsheets.
All the charts.
Love me some spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So basically, you pick the level. If it's a trap that's hidden, then the detection gets an extreme value, and everything else gets a high or low value. And then if it's easy to see but hard to deactivate, deactivating it gets an extreme value, and everything else gets a low or high value. Bada bing, bada boom. You skipping forward to defenses, hazard defenses, and hazard offenses. Defenses is honestly like not that interesting to me because a lot of times players want to just break it. And I think that's a perfectly fine.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like thing
if you
to
can't
do.
solve it, beat the hell out of it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
Tried
like,
and true.
Who needs to pick the lock on a chest when you could just shear the lock off? You know what I mean? With enough hammer swings.
Yeah.
So
no reducing, no reusing, no recycling.
Exactly. So it's one of these things where if it's hard to deactivate, it's probably also hard to destroy.
Sure.
So give it the extreme toughnesses that you'd want it to have if it's not hard to detect. And then finally, hazard offense. You just basically choose how much damage it does.
Right.
And whether or not the concept of the hazard will tell you whether or not it has an attack roll or a save of some sort. So for instance, like an environmental hazard where there's rocks falling from the sky would probably be like a reflex save. And a hazard where it's a poison dart shooting out of a wall, that's going to have an attack trait. If it's an attack happening to someone, especially if it's one of the trap hazards, that's almost always going to be an attack against an AC.
Yep.
And then if it's a environmental effect or something along those lines, it's a thing that's just going to happen and it's not trying to intentionally like hurt someone, I guess is the way to put it.
Sure.
It's just going to have like a reflex save, or maybe if it's a haunt, it'll have a will save. You know what I mean? Or a fortitude save.
Yeah. And there's examples of everything that you're talking about between page 100 and 106, 107 or so.
Yeah.
So there's almost like 10 pages worth of example after example after example. And I'm the kind of guy where, sure, you can show me how something works, but I need to compare it to something and get that reinforcement from seeing the thing multiple times.
So the main thing with hazard offense and damage is that if it's complex, it plays by different rules.
Yes.
If it's just a simple hazard, meaning it happens once and it doesn't reset, there's nothing more to it.
Right.
Then it gets one
the
set of
trap
damage.
triggers and that's it.
Those are often more deadly and have higher attack bonuses.
Right.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas because like it's going to happen once, and that's going to be the entirety of the budget, the damage budget for the trap for the entirety of the party. But when a hazard can be reset, you need to lower the damage because more than likely these fucking adventurers are going to re-trigger that hazard multiple times.
Sure. Until they solve the problem.
Exactly. And it really needs to be a problem you can solve. This is kind of in my mind where traps get interesting. They transcend set pieces and become characters of their own when they become complex. Simple traps are fun to paint a picture, tell a story about the place in one split second instant. But man, hazards that reset, like the one I'm about to talk about with my the one we came up with, they tell a story because they keep happening until you've solved or concluded something in the plot.
Whatever story that complex hazard is telling, hopefully is kind of pointing towards a larger story that everybody is playing in, the adventure itself.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be, certainly not.
Yeah.
You know, there's ancient ruins that go back 10,000 years that have traps that have nothing to do with why the guy born 30 years ago is trying to take over the planet.
Exactly.
It's just keep your characters interested and keep them going, oh, okay, I have to be here at this table at this time to play in this story.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't do this at any other table. And that's because my GM, Robert, in this case, has taken the time to link the hazards to the monsters, to the story itself, the BBEG. Just have it all make sense. You know, just imagine we're watching a movie or reading a book. We know these things.
Exactly. And then you're practically done. Like
I got a question for you at this point. So when we did the how to build a monster episode, one of the things we kept circling back to was if you're ever in doubt, go high.
Mm-hmm.
Just if you default to high, you're still coloring inside the lines and you should be fine.
That's definitely not the case.
That's not the case
here.
with hazards.
But to be fair to hazards, it's a lot easier to make the right choice. In the case of monsters, there were so many levers you had to pull in order to balance it. It was difficult. But here, it's so simple and straightforward. Is it hard to detect or is it hard to deactivate?
Yeah.
Make that choice.
Binary choices.
That binary choice basically flows into a very linear decision tree where you end up on one side or the other of the spectrum.
Right.
Once you've done that, you ask the question, is it simple or is it complex?
Okay.
That'll determine its damage and you're done.
So a complex hazard is simpler than the simplest monster.
A complex hazard is simpler than the simplest monster. That's one way to think about it, but I don't agree.
Okay.
Because, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out.
That was a cheeky throwaway line.
No,
anyways.
okay. I thought you were trying to be deep.
T-shirt humor.
For a second.
T-shirt
I thought you were
humor.
trying to be deep. So yeah, let's, now that we've kind of covered how to make one right out of the book, do you want to talk about the hazard you made?
Yeah, I made 2 hazards.
Oh, shit.
The first one I call the reskin. I took one that currently exists,
right,
and then I reskinned it. The second one is a complex hazard, and that's the one where I don't know if my math is solid, but I felt like I was still coloring in the lines.
Cool. Let's cover them both and kind of go over the math there.
Sure.
And just like walk ourselves through it.
You got it. All right, boys and girls. Why don't we open our books to wherever the fireball rune is.
Yeah. Fireball rune.
So there's a simple hazard called a fireball rune
Page
on
101.
page 101 of your GM core.
Bottom right hand corner.
It's a level 5 hazard. It's got the fire magical trap tags. Did you want me to just ramble on this, or do you want to ask me questions and lead me through my build?
Just keep going. Just give us a brief overview of what it does.
All right. So I'm not going to bore you with that or that. It's an invisible rune that creates an invisible spherical magical sensor with a 20-foot radius. So a 20-foot fireball, you can imagine.
So
that.
a wizard inscribes a rune on the ground or on a wall, and if you get within 20 feet of it, it explodes.
It just goes pop. It's super straightforward, simple. Cool. You're walking down a corridor, you take one step too many, and boom. You can disable it if you can catch it. And here's where things get fun. So once you trigger this thing, the fireball goes off. Arcane fire. Trigger. A living creature enters. Sensor effect. The rune detonates a fireball centered on the triggering creature's square. This is a 3rd rank fireball spell that deals 66 fire damage. DC 22 basic reflex save.
And this is a 5th level hazard.
It's a 5th level hazard, right? So I figured this is a good place to start. Level 1 stuff tends to not teach me the things I need to know. So I go to level 5, I go to level 10, 15. I jump up during those increments. So I basically took the fireball rune and I made it water. You get within 20 feet of it. The rune goes pop, and enough water to fill a 20-foot cube, I guess, pops out of the ceiling and does 66 bludgeoning water damage.
Fucking slaps you.
Yeah. And if there's nowhere for the water to go, imagine you're in a silo instead of grain, it's water. And now you have to deal with asphyxiation, suffocation. You got to swim up. Is this room connected to a pipe that already has water?
We talked about this adventure, this little dungeon you've been thinking.
I'm building this thing. Hazards that lead to hazards, that lead to monsters, that lead to hazards. It's all connected, man.
Oh, yeah, man.
What's that meme?
I have no idea.
You know.
From the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, with a billboard,
probably,
with the board is covered
string.
with red string. Yeah. That's Always Sunny. That's Always Sunny.
But the idea of connecting hazards and monsters and all that shit. But yeah, I wanted a fireball rune that was water based, did bludgeoning, liquid damage, and had the capacity to do an and then. You know, you trigger it, you take the damage, you save for half, and you move on to tea and crumpets. That's boring to me.
Got it.
I want to have an aftermath of a hazards trigger.
So this thing has got a disabled DC of 22. And when I look at the book, level 5, the high value for the disable is set at 22.
Okay, so that's
23. 22 or 23. It's set to 23. Right. So it's right around the right number. It's a little bit lower.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it looks like the stealth DC is set at 24.
Yeah, I hope all the math's out because this is in the book. I didn't make this thing.
Exactly. So it looks like this is a little closer to a 4th level math when it comes to stealth and disabled DCs, but that's okay. They made it just
a little bit low hanging fruit,
a little bit weaker. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's fine because with encounter math, we know there's low encounters, trivial encounters, moderate, extreme.
So this thing
severe.
is tweaked to be a little bit weaker. It's just a water. So it's a water rune that explodes, creates water, slaps them, and then it creates water in the area permanently.
Yep. You could do it with earth. You could do it with air. I just kind of wanted to take an elemental rune, metal and wood now. Ooh. And then when you get within 20 feet, pop. And then bad things happen.
Totally.
Cool. But I wanted it to have a continuing effect after that. And yet I didn't want to make it a complex hazard. So that's my simple hazard. It's a basic water rune.
Sweet. So tell us about your complex rune then. Because I think that's pretty straight, and I think that was a pretty straightforward example.
I think so. Yeah, it shouldn't be too many questions on that one. So where's my phony phone?
Oh yeah, show me breaking out the phone. He's got the Notion notes and everything.
I'm learning, you guys. I'm learning.
Yeah.
I call this hazard Sleeping Giant. It's also a level 5 hazard. I've got the complex and giant tags on here. For the stealth, I decided to go with DC 26 Expert. That's 2 points higher than the Fireball rune, and they're both level 5 hazards. So this one is it's
extreme stealth.
It's extreme stealth.
Got it.
And again, this is called Sleeping Giant. So hopefully it'll make sense why I made that decision.
Cool.
Description: an alchemically toxic algae burns in a hidden sensor in the room, causing the slumbering stone giant sleeping on the floor that is coated in algae grime. Causes that giant to toss and turn in their disturbed slumber. So imagine a stone giant is in a room and they're in a fitful, distressed slumber caused by this alchemical haze. And apparently this guy's been asleep for a while because his stone body is coated by this grime as the sensor burning the algae begins to settle all over the room and on him. And it affects him mentally. Essentially, he's having a fitful slumber and he like lashes out and repositions in his sleep. And he's a stone giant, so it hurts. Have you ever been in bed with your significant other and they just clock you in the fucking eye with their elbow?
I am unfortunately that significant other.
You're lucky Amy is not a stone giant because that's a hazard, my friend.
Oh yeah. I've gotten slapped back in the middle of the night and like woken up and like, what the hell was that for? She's
so
like,
the
Robert,
idea
you just decked me in the face. I'm like, I'm sorry.
So the idea of like needing to be extra stealthy, extreme stealthy on this. Part of it is just like navigating that space.
Yeah.
It's not so much sneaking past him. It's trying to move in a way where you avoid him and try not to make noise at the same time because he's sleeping.
So their movements are just happening almost randomly.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I don't know if I throw a die roll on here for, north, up, down, left, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
You can figure that out at your own table. Disabling this is a DC 23 trained. I believe that was still coloring in the lines. It's 1 point higher than the Fireball rune. I didn't want to get...
That's right on the high note for stealth and disabled DCs. So you are perfectly in line with what is expected.
Good. Yeah. I'm not doing this again. So disabled DC 23 trained. This would be for nature. This will allow you to locate and identify the toxic sensor. Or you can use Acrobatics DC 26, extreme again, to avoid the stone giant's thrashing fits long enough to locate the sensor. So this is like a cluttered environment. There's a sensor in there. It's been burning all this time.
I love the idea of a preferred skill and a secondary skill that's usable but not preferred and has a higher DC.
Yeah.
Kind of like using a lore.
Yeah. I almost... If I was drinking a bunch of whiskey tonight and I was just making declarative statements that I'm never planning on taking back, I think all hazards should have this.
Yeah.
I can't stand games where the wizard just twiddles his fucking thumbs all day because the fighter and the barbarian and the ranger are taking care of everything in the room. It's like, give every class a chance to shine, and you can have a single hazard that is approachable and solvable by multiple classes. But it gets significantly easier with the classes that have the right tools for the job. And that doesn't make the other classes irrelevant. It just makes it a little bit harder for them to navigate that hazard.
Absolutely.
And that gives everybody a chance to get some skin in the game. Instead of having like this binary, only you guys on that side of the table can interact with this hazard because you've got the numbers and we don't. Totally. So we'll just stay outside and wait with the horses. That's stupid. So yeah, in this case, it was nature for the toxic sensor. and what did I say? Acrobatics DC for the agility thing. So I didn't know whether I wanted to make it an acrobatics DC or have something involving like an extra stealth check. I just didn't want to have stealth appear too many times in this.
Yeah,
stat
absolutely.
block.
Stealth
That
is
felt
so
boring.
like perception and stealth especially are so prevalent in these kinds of.
And people who have them fucking max them out.
Yeah,
so they always win or they always fail.
That's
I
a good
never
point.
see anybody anywhere in the middle.
That's a good point. They are powerful.
Yeah. So that was that. Moving on to the new stuff, we have armor class 19.
Mm-hmm.
I picked 19 because, again, I was trying to stick close to what I saw here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's an AC for the fireball rune.
Low AC 19. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you picked a
I
low
probably
AC.
compared it to another hazard out here somewhere.
Yeah,
so
totally,
I ended up picking 19.
So my first knee jerk reaction is to assume that the players would just start fighting the stone giant.
Sure, which negates the hazard and it becomes a monster encounter of a level 5 stone giant, whatever.
That's cool.
And that's fine.
That's cool.
You
I like
win
how it
either
just
way.
kind of transforms on its own.
I like to have a backdoor in my encounters because players will always fuck your plan A.
Totally.
So get your plan B and C, you guys. We all know this.
You're gonna have to give me a plan C for my for my hazard because it's wild.
I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay.
I thought mine was wild. I can't wait to hear yours. So what did I pick for my saves? We have an AC of 19. I decided to go Fortitude and Reflex. So Fortitude 15, Reflex 10.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want a will component in this.
Yep, totally.
There is a mind-affecting algae that's everywhere. But
that's more of like a fortitude thing.
I kind of wanted to stick with the hardiness of the character.
Totally.
And the wisdom knowledge and the nature of poisons
And it makes sense
alchemy.
that like it would take so long for this thing to start affecting a stone giant because you'd imagine stone giants have like insane fortitudes.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And then offense.
Blah, 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 blah. What do we got here?
What's the damage on this bad boy? It's complex, right? Because
I'm just going down the line here. I've got a
my
hardness of 13.
Sure. Yeah.
Hit points of 50.
Mm-hmm.
Immunity, critical hits, object immunities, and precision damage. I picked 3.
Got it. And obviously, if the players decide to engage with it like a giant, those immunities just magically disappear, and now you have whatever immunities a stone.
Whatever the
giant
stat
will
block
have.
is for the giant itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God, how ugly would that be?
The stone giant attacks a couple times, and then they wake him up. Oof. Yeah. Back to back. That'd be awesome.
So what does this thing do? I had this reaction called rolling in their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pun on rolling in the deep.
Mm.
But the trigger, a creature approaches within, 20 feet of the sleeping stone giant. The effect is a sleeping stone giant reflexively readjusts their position in their sleep and lashes out with limbs, making an unarmed strike. It's a melee strike I'm calling Fitful Stretch. Again, with the 2-word double syllable unique dimensions.
Gotcha.
It's simply just like reaches out with a punch or an elbow or a kick or a knee or, scooch, scooch, scooch. And then like your dog might do if they're big enough, shove you up against the fucking wall with their feet. And you don't have a choice. Have you ever been in? It's a thing.
No, I've never.
Dogs.
We didn't.
They just sort of like get up close to you for the body heat. And then before you know it, you're like tacoed into the wall. It's like it's a reverse Kool-Aid, man. It's cool.
So I didn't grow up with dogs in the house.
Yeah.
Like when I did live with dogs, like out on the property, my family, we had dog houses. Like the dogs slept outside. The dogs didn't come inside.
Right.
Dogs stayed outside.
We had dog houses too. They were called our house.
yeah.
My apartment has a dog house.
That's what you get when you live in Florida.
Yeah. Well, my current dog is 6.5 pounds.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's a lot easier these days.
That's not a dog, Eric.
Spooning a dog that's half your weight is a little extra at 1 a.m. Anyhow, this thing rolling in the deep, it moves around, it lashes out as you get close by. And in Fitful Stretch plus 19 to hit damage, I picked 48 plus 9 bludgeoning.
Whoa. That's a lot.
It is. And I believe I did that because I found another level 5 somewhere that had
wild.
similar numbers. So I got that, is it off by a lot or just a little?
A lot.
A lot? Okay.
So
what does it recommend I bring it down to?
So if I'm not mistaken, this is a complex hazard.
It's a complex hazard, yes.
So 4d8 plus 14 is the recommended damage for a 5th level simple hazard.
5th level. That's probably why I grabbed that number. Okay.
So a 5th level complex hazard where they can get hit multiple times
brings it down to
half
2d8?
that. Exactly. 2d8 plus 7.
Plus 7. Okay.
So it's literally half the amount of damage.
Why 7 instead of 9 or 7 instead of 4.5.
Well, whenever you're making something, you can. This is like kind of a range, right? So you could tweak it a little bit if you wanted. You
Gotcha. Okay.
You could push up the
as long as you bring it down.
Yeah, because you're creating the added damage creates a ceiling for the random amount of damage, right?
Sure.
So by creating the ceiling that we want, or the floor, it creates a floor for the damage. So by creating a floor that we want, we can then reduce the randomness if we want to keep it within. This isn't an exact science.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They might have just wanted to add a couple points of damage because they felt like it. I don't blame them. You know what I mean?
Cool.
But
yeah,
it sounds like you pulled
that's good to
stats
learn,
for like
so,
a simple. Sounds like you pulled stats for a simple hazard instead of a complex one.
Yeah. I think I was looking at the fireball rune for too long.
And that's a great. That's like honestly a great learning example.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the important things goblins at home you should pay attention to is if it's a complex hazard, if it's gonna attack multiple times, make sure you use the complex damage category because it's literally twice as deadly. Which can cause like an encounter to go from whoa that was scary to
fucking low to severe or something.
Literally just killed one of the players.
Yeah,
you know
and
what I mean?
if that's the thing you're going for, be conscious of it, which is the exact opposite of what I just did.
yeah, totally. I mean, we all.
So the thing I really like about this is melee fitful stretch. It does bludgeoning plus lethargic pull. Lethargic pull. What is it? It's kind of like a grab thing. Strike plus grab.
I like it. So it's kind of like he's sleeping and then he goes to grab you and pull you in close, but you get like suffocated or something.
Kind of, sort of. I'll read here and then I'll see if I pull this off. But that would be rad too.
Yeah. Okay.
I dig that.
Yes, and
that'd be a will save.
Yeah.
This feels pretty good. I think I'll stay here, you guys. Go get the treasure. I'll be here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Lethargic pull. What is it? A creature hit by the stone giant's fitful stretch attack must attempt a DC 22 Fortitude save as the giant smears that creature with the greasy particulate grime that the sensor is sending everywhere in the room.
Oh, that's way worse.
It just sort of like goes like this and you dodge, but it still kind of like grimes you up.
Right.
And it's contact poison, essentially. The target is sickened 1 on a failed saving throw or sickened 2 on a critical failure.
Oh, and sickened would reduce your save.
Yeah.
So once
it's a complex hazard, so it goes for rounds,
and it makes you worse. So
and
this is a
the
good
more
example.
You fail, the worse it gets.
This is a good example of winning,
damage.
Lessening the damage. Obviously, I would actually say if this is the case, if you're adding a mechanic, it doesn't say this in the book, but this is my own intuition for encounter design. If you're adding mechanic that makes your players lose more when they lose, they'll lose, and it might create a spiral of sorts.
Sure,
definitely reduce the damage even more than what they recommend. So I would if that's the case, I'd probably take the damage from
bump it down to
2d8 plus 7, probably do 2d8 plus half the static, so like 2d8 plus 3.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That way, when they're losing the saves, it doesn't sting as much as it could have.
Yeah,
right?
That's good.
Or maybe just drop one of the d8, 1d8 plus 7 instead.
That's the thing I was wondering. When you start dropping dice, do we start going down to like a rank 4 or 3 hazard at that point?
Well, I think it's this is where they can't make hard and fast rules about it. But I think in the example of what you just said, where failing the hazard makes you more susceptible to the hazard again, you got to be careful. And a good place to be careful is just by reducing damage. Okay. Worst case scenario.
That's the easiest one.
It's the safest bet out of everything, right? Worst case scenario, the hazard happens, the player takes damage and is like, oh shit, that could have been bad.
Right.
Especially if you're hiding your dice from your players. Like if you have a DM screen up and you're rolling and your players are like, oh fuck, the giant hits you and you're like, oh shit, I take rolls damage, 13 damage. Oh fuck. Okay, cool. 13 damage. That's like a 10th of my HP. Okay. That's not actually at 5th level. It would probably be like a 6th of your HP. Right. So you just took a 6th of your HP. You got hurt, but you don't feel that bad. And then all of a sudden make a fucking save and you fail. And now you're sickened. You go to make the save again. And the DM's like, remember, you're sickened. And now that 13 damage, like on average, every round or whatever, is starting to feel a lot worse.
It gets significant. Yeah.
Yeah. So reducing that
escalating of stakes
can make it a safer bet to not just like kind of begin to TPK party, because that lose more after losing can spiral and also like really affect the morale, I think, of your players. If you're trying to create a tense moment where it kind of has like a grim, darky feel to it, where the more you lose, and everything is hopeless, then that I think is a great example of design with intention, where if you want them if you want them to have that gritty feel, like Dark Souls almost experience.
Sure. Yeah.
That meat grindery kind of experience.
Yeah. The expectation of demise.
Exactly. Losing more is a great way to do that.
Welcome to Mothership.
Welcome to Mothership.
This part I wasn't quite sure how to pull off, but like the criteria for resets.
Okay.
It's a complex hazard. How does this thing reset? This guy's sleeping and his little aromatherapy device is it's just spitting out and going and going and going. So I just put a default because I copied it from some other entry.
Totally.
The hazard deactivates and resets in 1 minute. I figured 6 combat rounds seemed fair to be able to get through this particular bit. So yeah, the poison kind of runs out at that point. And if you've managed to endure to, the 6-round mark, the 1 minute mark, then you're good. You can keep going through.
That's cool. That's cool.
So that's my complex hazard.
Heck yeah. So let me talk about mine then.
Yep, bring it.
Mine is called Symphony of the Dead.
I love it.
So we sat down and I started explaining how hazards work to Amy, and she was like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. It's cool. And so I started showing her examples of some of the hazards. I was flipping through them and stuff like that. And at first she was like, oh, it'd be funny if you had a hazard that like threw the players into another hazard. Like imagine like a springboard that when you step on it, it just went bling and shot you into another hazard that like punched you or something like that.
Yeah, very Acme.
Yeah, exactly. Very Acme. And I thought that was hilarious. I'm like, okay, let's roll with that. So we've got a 2-part hazard. One part of the hazard yeets you into another hazard, and then you get fucked, right? So I started rolling through the example pages and kind of just looking at photos with her and stuff like that. And then we saw the ghostly choir. And she was like, oh, this is on page 102 of the GM guide. She's
absolutely
like, oh, this is so fucking cool. Yeah. I'm like, all right. So what if the spring-loaded thing yeets you into the ghosts, to the haunt? So originally I had this idea for like a square room with like a ravine in the center and stuff like that. And maybe there's like a ghostly hand that grabs you. It's like a giant spectral hand, the size of like an elephant or something. And she's like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But, like I like the idea of it being like maybe in a church, it's a choir. Sure. Maybe there's an organ and it's tied to the organ somehow. And I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Okay. Take it a step back. So we're in this church. All right. And there's this ghostly choir that's going to go off. Maybe when you get too close to it or something, just like it has in this hazard already. And maybe you have to play the organ at the center of the church in the back to disable the haunt. Maybe that's what you have to do. You have to play the song along with the choir to do it. And she's like, yeah, but how does a spring happen? And I'm like, oh, I thought we just dropped the spring. And she's like, okay, yeah. What if they don't do it right? The chair launches them through the ceiling. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm getting some
real Goonies vibes here.
What the fuck? She's like, I'm like, do you mean like they hit the ceiling? And she's like, no, they got to go through the ceiling. the chair's got to launch them through the ceiling. And I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's back up a bit. I love this. I'm trying to yes and this, but what trap designer in their right mind would make a trap that destroys the building they're in, especially in a church? And she got kind of go quiet, and I'm like,
goblins.
What if the ceiling was a stained glass fresca?
Okay.
Right? And when you reset the trap of the ghosts, the choir starts singing and the glass shards
that's good.
Rise back up and reform the fresca, resetting the entirety of both traps together.
Yeah.
So how cool is that?
You've got the magic tag in your trap.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Magic. We've got haunt, obviously. I don't know if that's a tag.
It is, yes.
Okay, cool. And
yeah, trap is a tag, haunt is a tag, and I think you said the third
so it's going to have trap and haunt because they're kind of connected, right? So eventually we kind of workshop this into this idea
environmental,
where she basically literally just created an adventure out of nowhere. So here's all my notes. I'm just going to read them and we can pick it apart as we go.
Go for it.
So the player's goal is to solve the mystery of a haunted church for whatever reason, MacGuffin insert here. All right. So this is a 2-part complex hazard. we're assuming it's the goal of an adventurer to disable it. This is kind of the penultimate moment of the adventure. This is what they've been sent here to do.
Sure.
So if we're creating an adventure around this hazard, like we're thinking, the party has to go from location A, their home base, to location B, inside of this church where the hazard is. They run into a couple encounters along the way, maybe some zombies out front or something like that, maybe some zombie nuns or something like that outside the abbey or whatever, right? They've gathered some information. They finally made their way here inside the church. They're here to disable this haunt, this trap, and then they're done. They've succeeded. There's a ghostly choir who sings and deals damage in the back. All right. Now, assuming it's the goal of the party to disable the trap, the way you disable it is by playing the correct song, playing the correct song at the organ in the back of the church.
Okay.
Right. If they fail to play the correct song or well enough, so to me, I'm thinking you have to have discovered some information, and then you had to have done a correct performance check to play the song correctly so that you don't get literally yeeted through the ceiling.
Interesting.
So so here we go. If they failed to play the correct song or well enough, the choir seat is spring-loaded and it jacks them through the stained glass ceiling. When the choir begins to sing again, the broken shards of the stained glass reform, reconfiguring and bringing it all back anew, right? For the haunt portion of the trap, use the ghostly choir, hazard 6 on page 102 of the GM core. So it's literally, I literally made half of this, which is a spring-loaded seat. And I just took this ghostly choir and stapled them together.
Yep.
So in a sense, I have two hazards as well. They're just like attached to each other.
Sure.
So the ghostly choir is basically going on in the background. My idea was you walk into this church, you hear like a faint echoing of singing as if someone's singing in another room, and the ghosts haven't appeared yet. You get closer and closer, and all of a sudden the ghosts appear. They're not singing, they're not threatening you yet, but there's some implication there. Sure. And then when you get close enough, they start singing and they hurt you. But if you can move and touch, get your hands on the organ itself, they stop singing.
Okay.
And they let you get in place to play the organ.
Sure.
And begin playing the organ. And then they sing along with you. They don't hurt you in that moment. But if you fail to roll well and you've failed to have gathered information previously, then you get yeeted through the ceiling and you either fall on the top of the abbey or you fall on the other side. And what I did was I took a 6th level trap, right? And I did the basic statistics for a trap that's hard to see. So for instance, I did ejecting seat 6 is the name of the trap. Stealth DC is 28, which is the extreme stealth for a level 6 encounter. Description: a powerful spring hidden under the seat into a piano flings the occupant into the air through a stained glass window. The disable DC is 20 thievery to disable the spring. That's a low check to disable. So I had a high to find, which means I need a low disable check. That's how the balance works. AC is 22, fortitude and reflex save is 16. Those are the medium to low end of the spectrum. Hardness 13, HP 54, immunities, it's an item, yada, yada, yada. I basically picked medium to low because at the end of the day, it's literally just a chair. You know what I mean? It's going to be pretty easy to break it, even though there's a giant spring coiled up in the center of it. Right. And then we have like the crash and fall, right? So that's a reaction triggered by them playing the song, them failing the check. It's really important that when you have a trap that can be triggered for doing something incorrectly, it's important to let the player off the hook if they succeed on the check. It's also important to, when you're disabling a device should only go off while you're disabling it if you critically fail to disable it.
Okay.
And that's important
is
to
keep
that
a rubber thing, or is that
that's in the book.
PF2
that's
thing?
in the book. That's in the book. So here, it's really easy to break this trap. Once you've detected that it's going to yeet you, no one's expecting that, right? So once you know that there's a fucking spring in there, you can just break it and
Got the Spanish Inquisition in the cushions.
Exactly. Once you could slip a knife in there and cut it up, and it's not a big deal. So the disabling of it's not that hard. It's finding it. That's the
locating
issue,
it. Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, that makes sense.
If you save, the DC for it is 25. You can just stand up, and the spring fires off behind you, and you're unscathed. So on a save, nothing happens basically, but we all get to see the spring go off and just goes wah, wah, and it just kind of like tips over behind you basically. And then now you're playing the organ kind of standing, whatever. It does 2d8 plus 9 bludgeoning damage. That is the low end of the damage. That's a complex damage. Even though this is a simple trap, because I stapled it to a complex trap that resets constantly, I kept the damage low.
Okay.
Because in my mind, this whole trap together is complex. It's not simple. Because one element is complex, the whole thing is complex, which means all the damage
needs to be low.
Needs to be complex, which is the lower damage. So basically you take 2d8 plus 9 bludgeoning damage for getting thrown through a stained glass window and landing on the top of the cathedral or landing behind the cathedral somewhere on the grounds, right? Let's talk about
falling damage and all of that. Did you not?
I didn't include falling damage because that would actually make it way too deadly. Sure. Because then you'd have to do the math and all that shit. So it's basically just like, this is the damage for you landing, and that's it. It's all wrapped up in one place. Then she had this great idea of being like, okay, so how do we find out what song to play? And I'm like, all right, this is a good question. We should answer. Maybe they can like listen to the song, that quiet singing goes in the background. She's like, yeah, but that doesn't really sound too much fun. There's not a lot of investigating going on right there. What if they have to dig up the dead body of the Abbey guy who was running the place and played the organ before, and he like was buried with the song on his, holding the song in his hands or something like that.
You think he's holding a scroll of some sort of power, and it turns out it's music?
Exactly. It's a music sheet. So she's like, okay, in order to learn the song and do the performance check with the low DC, you have to go into the graveyard outside and go dig his body up. You got to find him, dig his body up. You probably have to fight some zombies or something that attack you for disturbing the dead. That's another encounter, right? Remember, we're building encounters. We built an adventure here. Got to go out there, dig up his body. If not, you can do a harder performance check to learn the song by ear by listening to the echoes for a long time and try and play it. That's going to make your...
I like the adjusting of the DCs for this based on the interaction with the hazard.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And this is what I was talking about, the adventure building that's going on here. Like, we can create hazards that are not just set pieces. They're literally parts of the adventure that react and act to the players. And that's it. You have your bard or whoever walk up, play. And this is one of those things, going back to your hazard, where it had options for multiple different players. This is a pretty bard centric hazard, right? If you have a performance person in the party, this is the creme de la creme. But I also said, like, maybe you could use a society check to play the piano or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, charisma doesn't necessarily relate to your ability to play an instrument, right? We've all met very uncharismatic, artists and performers. So, especially musicians. So I what I wrote down was like a society or a performance check to play the piano correctly and disable the haunt and stuff like that. And then that's the end of that adventure.
Yeah. Society and performance. Is it recommended that there's 2?
There's no recommendation there.
I didn't see one either.
I think you and I both kind of intuitively came up with the idea of giving players options based on different stats to solve a problem creatively. And I love that.
Yeah. I don't see a problem necessarily. And this is more of the board game, the gaming of games in my brain. Have one for all the characters, set your party, a way for each of them to solve, and whoever does it, they've got a way to interact with it. That's one way to do it. If you want to be draconian and say you can only do this with the performance and you can only do this with the other one, then that's totally fine too. But like, having that plan A, which is if you don't have these 2, you're screwed. That's plan A. Plan B might be, okay, well, we still need to make this a fun experience. Because if everybody walks into a hazard and it's a TPK because nobody had that, that baking lore
Baking
that they
lore?
needed to solve this
my
story
God,
problem,
that would be amazing.
then why was that hazard there in the first
Yeah.
place? It doesn't inform anything.
It reminds me of that orc and pie, that classic adventure where like, you put a pie on the windowsill and orc comes and steals it. The party has to go find the orc and kill the orc and bring the pie back home and stuff like that.
I've heard you tell this one before.
What if instead you have to go find the orc and then teach them how to, and be like, no orc, you don't get to steal. We have to make a pie for grandma now. And then you create a hazard where you have to help the orc learn how to cook a pie.
Right.
And it's like crafting pie.
And depending on how you interact with that orc, that kind of makes the DC do this.
Yes. Speaking of that, what I was thinking was for the performance DC to disable the choir, we would actually make it lower. So we would actually, so the choir's disabled DC right now is 28, which is really high. And on the trap built into the game, it's DC 28 performance trained to disrupt the song's resonance with another tune, or DC 28 religion trained to ritually silence the spirits. This is where I got the idea of using 2 skills because it gave you 2 skills here. And I was like, I wanted to build on that. But using religion, I mean, obviously I think I would let the players use religion too, because they're ghosts. So of course you have to let them use religion.
God. Yeah.
But at the same time, I like the idea of the performance tying into the piano,
the performance almost feels like a stand-in for diplomacy. And I kind of, in my brain, I was wishing you were going to say, and you can also intimidate the choir. Stop talking. This is practice time.
Right.
You stand up straight. Open up your diaphragm. Like intimidation being a way for somebody to interact with this bard-centric trap.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's a million ways you can solve each individual trap. You just got to put it in there. No.
So I might be wrong here, but I feel like I found the book not following its own rules.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
The rules are kind of guidelines.
So the effect is the choir rises and sings a song dealing 4d8 plus 18 mental damage. And if this were a simple trap, it would be doing 48 plus 18. But it seems to be complex to me. It doesn't have the complex tag, but nothing has the complex tag. That's not a tag that you can have. So I wonder, they have a section for complex hazards, right? Maybe this is
a tag. Yeah, if it's a complex hazard.
Oh yeah, you're
complex.
right. Okay, I'm mistaken. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So this is supposed to be a simple hazard, where maybe it doesn't reset. I felt like it said that it basically resets, which makes sense because like the choir shows up and they start singing, and then if you go away,
this is definitely a one and done thing. I'm looking at here. But you took that ghostly choir simple hazard, combine it with something else to make a complex hazard.
And in my mind, they would keep singing if you fucked up. They would keep hurting you and berating you with this melody that hurts you. And like the effect of the choir makes you frightened one. And this is a lose more situation like I was talking about before.
Right.
So once you fail, it's harder to play the song until you get away and wrap your mind around your own fears and go back in.
And then somebody else has to step in with whatever skill they're attempting to use.
Exactly. So when I was writing the hazard, I actually used the choir complex. So I used the complex damage instead, which is what I'd recommend for this hazard instead of using it as a simple one. But yeah, if it is a simple, then then that damage is appropriate based on the rules that they've laid out here, which is good. I mean, like this kind of thing is important to understand. Like, we're just wrapping our minds around this concept. And I'm happy that we can kind of show on screen or, in your ear holes that we're learning alongside you guys and that we're prone to make mistakes, obviously.
Yep, our words are showing.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. So that's my hazard.
I really like your hazard. There are so many different ways to interact with your hazard as a player in that game. I can imagine being a GM running that hazard and trying to find different ways for players to navigate that experience. I was kind of thinking you were going to go in a different direction than you did. I kind of pictured like you do the thing well, the chorus sings, and it's a success, so they hit a note. That shatters that glass wall, and that's how we continue through the dungeon.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Or you fail, and because it's in your case it was a complex hazard, but let's pretend it was a simple hazard, like the actual one in the book. They just kind of like look at you like this, do their damage, and the ghosts dissipate. They fucking leave. They walk out of practice.
Not good enough.
Right. Because
disqualified.
Because the conductor is drunk again or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, just having, God, how does your hazard interact with the physicality of the location above and beyond just simply triggering and doing damage and then moving on? That's the same as like getting into an orc fight, killing it, grabbing the treasure, and then moving on.
Exactly.
That's the same useless part of my brain. So, yeah, I like how dynamic traps can get, especially when they're complex.
I don't remember the character name, but Amy is a big fan of that Skyrim world. We had like Morrowind and Oblivion.
Yeah.
I never got to play them growing up, but she said that there's like a king who just like, if you don't answer him correctly, he just yeets you into the sky. And you can like see the whole map.
Scrolls, huh?
Yeah, and then you could like see the whole map, and then you fall and hit the ground, and you take a bunch of damage if you don't have a spell or something like that. And that's what she was trying to imitate. Is this king?
Oh, that's hilarious! That sounds like something out of Zelda.
Yeah, and the insanity of it is where it comes from. So, like to me, in my mind, maybe the story of this location was like an insane choir church or something like that. Maybe there's like an insane inventor combined with musicality and religion all in one kind of one storm brewing all together and mixing in the same pot. And that's kind of the character of this place and of the past that you get to learn about by interacting with the trap or the hazard in the first place.
Yeah, I talk a lot in my normal life about like setting as character.
Yeah.
You know, hazards as character, hazards as setting. You know, that's it's very Venn diagrammy up in my head. And as I look at things like Indiana Jones, what did traps look like there? Well, they were kind of black and white traps, you know, a swinging blade, a hallway full of shooting darts, a crumbling building around you as you try to get through it, a boulder trailing you. They got a little more mystical and magical where you had like the Holy Grail and you had to choose well.
Yeah.
Don't choose poorly. Don't be like that guy. But that's, you know, that's kind of a haunt, you know, that's more haunt and less of a technical trap.
Absolutely. Yeah, you totally define those as a haunt. Absolutely. 100%.
In Lord of the Rings, to pick out like a popular culture example of an environmental haunt, like the magma flow we were talking about or the tornado, they had that really cool nope scene where they're all going up the mountains, the Pass of Caradhras, and it's snowy and it's storming and it's snowing and we can't do much more of this. And Gimli says, think of the hobbits. They can't handle this, because Gimli's always doing shit like that.
Right.
We need to turn back. And then, but wait, there's more. There's stone giants throwing rocks at each other. And those rocks are causing avalanches on the passes.
And you're caught in the middle of it.
And you're caught in the middle. So like, what do those saving throws look like? What do those skill checks look like? What's the trigger? Is it physically getting to a certain point in the path and then everything happens?
Yes, snowfall is a simple environmental hazard.
A level 0 hazard called snowfall.
So we have that, and now we're adding rock giant pitching contest on top of it.
Yeah, and balance issues with the the great death below the path.
Yeah.
Fall off the mountain.
That sounds like a good example of combining two environmental hazards to make them even more interesting and
yeah,
complex.
And you throw the environmental tag on it because that's how you know what kind of hazard you're looking at.
Exactly.
And I think even Aragorn had a really cool hazard moment too. I've been trying to think of like movies that I love and adore and say these were not monster encounters, these were hazard encounters, or these were not hazard, these were monster encounters, so on and so forth. And when Aragorn went to go find all of his ghostly pirate buddies, don't yell at me about spoilers right now. This has been out long enough.
Yeah. If you're getting spoiled for Lord of the Rings first, go get your diaper changed and then come back to. You're probably not old enough to listen to the fucking curse words in this podcast. Let's just put it that way. And if you are somehow old enough, please just go watch the movies.
And I'm going to spoil it anyways. So we need allies. That's the whole point of what Aragorn's doing here. So he finds I think they're called like the Halls of Dunharrow or something.
Okay.
And Dunhollow, something like that. And it's basically a bunch of cursed men from the old days, and they want to get their honor back. And so Aragorn says, diplomacy. That's his skill check he used to solve this hazard. So instead of like doing some sort of weird man versus ghost initiative and do your 3-action economy and all that. No, fuck that. This is a hazard situation. The hazard was triggered the minute you told them who you were. You revealed your identity. And they're like, oh, this is interesting. And all the ghosts come out and you're like, oh, I'm well and truly fucked if I don't figure this out.
Yep.
So I better start investigating this hazard. and finding a way to disable it.
By having a conversation with it.
And it turned out it was diplomacy that he used for it. He didn't use intimidation. He didn't use lies or trickery or deception. He stuck with that. And there was a DC level with that, a DC value. And he made it because he showed up at the Black Gates of Mordor with a bunch of pirates.
And that would be a really good example of a trap, a haunt that has a low stealth check,
100%.
almost no stealth check, and a high DC to disable it. Because it's obvious to what you're running into. And then
it would have been instant death. So the damage would have been on the extreme side in that example.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of hazard that if you die during that hazard, that's a fucking story.
Well, I mean,
it's not
epic.
like you stubbed your toe in a hazard and you bled to death.
It's a fucking epic movie. So it's like, of course, all of the damage has to be, you know what I mean, extreme or whatever.
If I'm going to lose my character sheet to a hazard, I want it to be a cave full of ghost pirates.
Absolutely.
So those are just some examples in popular culture. Indiana Jones, a couple of guys from Lord of the Rings. Hazards are everywhere. They're environmental. They're kobold, trappy, McTrappy. And they're also, I already said environmental. What's the other one?
Oh, haunts.
Haunts. Yeah, they're ghostly, spectral. They're occulty. They're arcanic.
And then they can be simple, where they happen once and they're done, or they can be complex, where they reset. And they have motion to
them. The longer you take to figure it out, the more it hurts as you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And the damage is always lower.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the short pod we're about to do, where we like actually go into the individual discrete steps and linger on values and all that. So that's coming up real soon.
Awesome. Well, I think that's pretty much it for us today here, Goblins. Thanks so much for vibing with us. Again, hit us up with your ideas, your hazard creations in the comments. Jump into the Discord, and
Everyone
make some
else
hazards with us. We're having a blast. Just vibing on the Discord. And, you know, if you're interested in supporting us financially on the Patreon, that would be amazing. If you don't have the ability to support us financially, you can still support us by like sharing our podcast with your friends, your family, any other fucking nerd you think would want to listen to us ramble for hours on end. You know, give us thumbs up, rated good on the thing. That's always awesome. But as always, you must remember to...
It's a trap.
Keep it weird.